She was checking his 4-line when she noticed a syringe on the floor. It had rolled under the supply cart, nearly out of sight. If she hadn't bent down to pick up the chart she dropped, she never would have seen it. She picked it up carefully, turned it over in her gloved hand. It wasn't one of theirs. The label was wrong. The dosage was wrong. And the cap had already been removed. Someone had been in this room. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here. And the man lying in that bed, the one the news called one of the most powerful men in America, had no idea how close he just came to never waking up again. Simone Bridges stood very still for a moment. Then she hit the call button, locked the door, and pulled out her phone. She didn't know yet that this night was going to change everything. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you emotional stories that stay with you. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you're returning, thank you. Your support means everything. Now stay until the end. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and let's begin. Simone had worked the night shift at Harlow Medical for 6 years. Private facility, private patients, private rules. The kind of place where the waiting rooms had fresh flowers every morning, and the hallways smelled like eucalyptus instead of disinfectant. Where the staff wore pressed navy scrubs and spoke in low, careful voices. Where you learned fast that what happened inside these walls stayed inside these walls. She had seen celebrities recover from addiction here. Politicians get procedures that were never going to appear in any public record. Executives who arrived in black SUVs with security details and left 2 weeks later looking 10 years younger. Simone had learned how to ask questions. She showed up, did her job better than anyone on that floor, and went home. She was good at invisible. She had been practicing it her whole life. The night Reid Winslow arrived, she was at the nurse's station finishing a handoff report when the elevator opened and 4 men in dark suits walked out first, scanning the hallway before anyone else stepped off. Then 2 EMTs with a gurney. Then a woman in a gray blazer who was already on the phone, walking fast, not looking at anyone. And then, flat on that gurney with one arm in a temporary cast and a gash across his jaw that had been poorly bandaged by someone in a hurry, was a man who looked like he had been through something the news was not going to fully explain. Simone had seen his face before, not in person, but on screens. Reid Winslow, 35 years old, founder of Winslow Systems, the kind of tech money that got you on magazine covers and invited to things regular people never heard about. The kind of man who moved through the world like it was built for him. He did not look like that right now. Right now he looked pale, tight around the jaw, and like he was working very hard to stay conscious out of pure stubbornness. His hazel eyes were open, and they moved across the room until they landed on her. Not on the suited man, not on the woman in the blazer, who was now barking instructions at the admissions coordinator. On Simone. She looked away first. Habit. Dr. Okafor appeared from around the corner, chart already in hand. He gave Simone a look she recognized. The look that meant this one is yours tonight. Stay close. She nodded once and followed the gurney into Suite 14, the corner room at the end of the hall that they kept for the patients who required extra security, extra quiet, and extra everything. What she learned in the next 20 minutes, from the transfer notes and from Dr. Okafor speaking in the clipped shorthand they used when the details were sensitive, was this. Reid Winslow had been struck by a vehicle outside a parking structure in downtown Houston 3 nights ago. The impact had damaged his spinal cord at the lumbar level. He had been at a smaller hospital first, a decision his team made to keep things quiet. But something about that first facility had spooked the security detail, and they moved him here fast. He was paralyzed from the waist down. Whether that was permanent, they did not yet know. The woman in the gray blazer was his chief of staff. Her name was Karen Voss, and she had the energy of someone who had not slept in 3 days and was running entirely on control. She pulled Simone aside before she even had her gloves on and said, very quietly, that no information about Mr. Winslow's condition, his location, or anything that happened in that room was to leave the floor. Not other staff. Not to family, who called without the correct verification code. Not to anyone. Simone said, that's standard protocol here. Karen looked at her like she was deciding something. Then she nodded and stepped back. Simone went in and did her job. He was awake when she started her assessment. He watched her work without speaking, which she appreciated. Some patients talked too much when they were scared. She checked his vitals, checked a 4-line that had been placed at the previous facility, and immediately didn't like the positioning of it. Checked the wound on his jaw, which was going to need proper attention, and made 3 quiet notes in his chart. "You're going to feel that jaw tomorrow," she said, not to make conversation, just because it was true, and people did better when someone told them the truth straight. "I already feel it," he said. His voice was lower than she expected, even and controlled in a way that told her he was managing pain he wasn't going to admit to. "I'm going to redress it properly. The bandage they put on is going to pull when it dries." He said nothing. She took that as agreement and got what she needed from the supply cart. She was almost done when she dropped the chart, bent to get it, and saw the syringe. She didn't move for a full 3 seconds. Her brain was already running through what she was looking at. Wrong label, wrong dosage, cap removed, positioned in a way that suggested it had rolled, which meant it had been dropped by someone who didn't mean to drop it, someone who had been standing right next to this bed. The room had been locked when the patient arrived. She had the access log in her hand. Only Dr. Okafor, the 2 EMTs, Karen Voss, and 2 of the security detail had entered. The EMTs were gone, which left 4 people. She stood up slowly. She did not look at him yet. She walked to the supply cart, found a sealed evidence bag they kept for exactly the kind of facility incidents that nobody talked about publicly, and sealed the syringe inside it. Then she hit the call button on the wall, kept her voice completely flat when she told the desk she needed Dr. Okafor in Suite 14 immediately, and locked the door. Then she looked at Reid Winslow. He was watching her with an expression she hadn't seen on a patient before. Not fear, not confusion. Something more like recognition, like a man who had just been told something he already suspected. "Someone was going to hurt you tonight," she said. She didn't see a reason to soften it. He held her gaze. "I know," he said. Her chest tightened slightly. "You know, I've known someone was coming. I didn't know when." He paused. "I didn't think it would be this fast." She stood there for a moment with the evidence bag in her hand and looked at this man who had arrived in her hospital broken and hunted. And she felt something shift very quietly in the back of her mind. The part of her that was good at reading situations. The part that had kept her out of trouble for 6 years in a place where trouble wore expensive suits. This was not going to be a routine case. Dr. Okafor knocked twice before she unlocked the door. If you're feeling this story, hype it so others can find it. Comment where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Dr. Okafor took the evidence bag without a word, looked at it for a long moment, then looked at Simone. She gave him the full account, what she saw, where it was, the position it had rolled from. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things she respected about him. When she finished, he said he was going to handle it quietly and that she was not to document it in the standard system. He would create a separate incident file. She nodded. She had been at Harlow long enough to know what that meant. Whatever had happened tonight was going to be investigated in a way that never touched a public record. After he left, she pulled a chair to the corner of the room and stayed. Protocol for high-risk patients required a nurse present through the first overnight window. She had done it dozens of times. Usually she brought paperwork. Tonight, she sat with her hands in her lap and listened to the building settle around her. Reid slept for about 2 hours. When he woke up, it was past midnight, and the floor was completely quiet. She heard his breathing change before he spoke. "You're still here," he said. "Protocol," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "What's your name?" "Simone." He repeated it once, like he was storing it somewhere carefully. Then he said, "How long have you worked here?" 6 years. "You like it?" She thought about that honestly. "I'm good at it." He made a small sound that might have been the beginning of a smile. "That's not what I asked." She looked at him across the dim room. His jaw was properly bandaged now, the swelling already starting to show color along the left side of his face. He looked better than he had 2 hours ago, and worse at the same time, the way people did when the shock wore off and reality settled in its place. "No," she said. "That's not what you asked." She didn't answer further, and he didn't push. She appreciated that about him already, which she noted and set aside. Over the next few days, Simone requested to stay on his rotation. She told herself it was because the situation was not resolved, and she wanted to make sure nothing else got past her. That was part of it. The other part she didn't examine too closely yet. She learned his rhythms fast. He was a light sleeper who woke before 5 every morning and lay there in the dark, not calling anyone, just thinking. He had a sharp mind that needed to stay occupied, or it turned on him. His chief of staff, Karen, came every afternoon, and they worked for 2 hours, laptops open, voices low. He didn't complain about the pain, not once, but she knew from his chart and from watching him that it was there, and it was significant. What he did complain about, quietly and with a dry precision that she found herself looking forward to, was everything else. The food, the temperature of the room, the specific brand of disposable cup they used at the water station, not in a demanding way. In the way of a man whose brain was running at full speed with nowhere to go, finding small targets for the energy that used to run a company. One morning, she brought him a different breakfast tray than the standard order. She had asked the kitchen to swap it out. Nothing dramatic, just real food, scrambled eggs that were actually cooked right, toast that wasn't the color of cardboard, orange juice that came from an actual orange. He looked at the tray. Then he looked at her. Nobody approved that, she said before he could ask. Don't tell Karen. He ate every bite without another word, and she pretended not to notice. His security team had been quietly restructured after the syringe incident. 2 of the original 4 detail members were reassigned pending investigation. New people came in. Karen walked around with a tighter jaw than usual. Reid said nothing about any of it publicly, but Simone caught him watching the door, sometimes in a way that had nothing to do with expecting a visitor. He was waiting for the next move. She could see it. On the 4th night, she was documenting his evening assessment when he said, without looking up from the report he was reviewing, "The person who came into this room, do you have a theory?" She kept writing. "That's not my department. You saw the syringe. You sealed it. You locked the door before you even called the doctor." He paused. "You had a theory before Okafor walked in." She looked up at him. He was watching her with those hazel eyes that were clearer now than they had been on arrival, more present, more direct. The fog of the first night was completely gone, and what was underneath, it was a man who missed very little. Someone with access, she said. Someone who was supposed to be in that room. So nobody would question them. Someone who knew exactly how long they had before the next check. He nodded slowly. "Karen's been with me for 4 years. I'm not saying it was Karen. I know you're not." He set down his report. "I'm saying I've already eliminated her, which doesn't leave many people." She held his gaze. "Why are you telling me this?" He was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of someone who didn't have an answer, the quiet of someone deciding how honest to be. "Because you're the only person in this building I trust right now," he said. "And I don't entirely know why, but I've learned not to ignore that." Her chest did something she didn't give her permission to do. She looked back down at her chart. "Get some sleep," she said. "Your PT assessment is at 7. He didn't say anything else. But when she looked up 20 minutes later before leaving the room, he was still awake, and he was still watching the door. Only this time it looked less like waiting for a threat and more like a man thinking about something else entirely. She told herself that was his business and walked out. She almost believed it. The week Reid Winslow stopped being just a patient happened on a Wednesday. Simone had come in early to cover a colleague's shift and was doing a routine check when she found him already awake, sitting up in bed with his laptop open and 3 separate phones lined up on the blanket beside him. He looked like a man running a war from a hospital bed, which she suspected was not far from the truth. She did her check without interrupting. Vitals for line chart update. He let her work. That was their rhythm now, and she had stopped pretending she didn't appreciate it. Then she reached past him to adjust the monitor, and his hand closed gently around her wrist. Not grabbing, not demanding, just stopping her. She went still. "Sit down for a minute," he said. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his face. "I have 4 other patients." 1 minute. She sat. He turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a security still, grainy but clear enough. A figure in navy scrubs, a Harlow badge visible on the chest, standing outside Suite 14 2 nights before Reid arrived. Standing there for 11 minutes, according to the timestamp. Just standing, not entering, not leaving, waiting. That badge belongs to a Harlow employee, he said. Someone pulled the records and identified them this morning. They haven't come to work since the night I arrived. Simone looked at the image carefully. She didn't recognize the face from the angle, but she recognized something else. The posture, the way the figure stood slightly turned toward the camera, which meant they knew exactly where the camera was, and had calculated the angle to keep their face mostly hidden. That wasn't accidental. That was practice. Whoever this is, she said, they've done this before. Yes, Reid said. My team thinks so too. She handed the laptop back. You need to take this to someone beyond your security team. Someone outside your company. I know. He paused. I'm working on trusting the right person for that. She looked at him. That sounds like a problem you've had for a while. Something moved across his face. Not offense. More like recognition. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. She stood to leave, and he said her name. Just her name. The way he said it landed differently than it should have, and she stopped with her back still half-turned. The hit and run, he said. It wasn't random. My business partner of 9 years signed off on it. I have the proof. I've had it for 2 weeks. He let that sit for a moment. I needed to be somewhere safe before I moved on it. Somewhere nobody would think to look for me making that kind of move. She turned around fully. You came here on purpose. Karen found this facility. But yes, I needed to disappear long enough to get the next step right. He looked at her steadily. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you've been protecting. And because I think you already knew this wasn't a simple recovery case. She had known. She had known from the syringe, from the way the security details spoke to each other in a language of glances and positions, from the way Karen Voss's eyes moved to the door every time she heard the elevator open. How long before you make your move? Simone asked. 4 days. Maybe 5. She nodded slowly. She should have said something professional. Something that put distance between his situation and her role in it. She had a gift for that kind of distance. She had been building it for 6 years. Instead, she said, Then you need to eat better than what this kitchen is sending up. Your body is fighting to repair itself, and it needs real food. I'm going to talk to the kitchen again. He looked at her for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth lifted. It was the first time she had seen anything close to a real smile on him, and it did something to the temperature of the room that she chose not to acknowledge. 3 days later, she was doing his evening medication when she realized she had started looking forward to his floor in a way she hadn't looked forward to anything in a long time. Not because of what he was, because of who he was in that room. Stripped of the money and the power and the magazine covers. He was just a man in a hard situation who was still thinking clearly and still choosing to be decent. She had met very few people she could say that about. She was checking the 4 line, standing close when he said it, quietly, without any performance behind it. Be with me, he said, when this is over. When I'm out of here and this is done. He paused. Be with me and see if I can't handle you. She didn't move for a moment. Outside the room, the floor hummed with its usual quiet nighttime life. A monitor beeping 2 rooms down. The elevator opening and closing at the far end of the hall. Somewhere a phone ringing once and stopping. She looked at him. He was watching her with those hazel eyes, and the expression on his face was the most unguarded she had ever seen it. Not the control man who ran a company. Not the patient calculating his next move. Just a man asking a woman a question he already knew was a risk. You don't know me, she said. I know you saw a syringe on the floor in the dark, and your first move was to protect a stranger. I know you brought me real eggs because you decided I deserved better than what they were serving. I know you sit in the corner of this room at midnight, and you don't talk just to fill the silence. He held her gaze. I know enough. Her throat was tight in a way she wasn't prepared for. You're still my patient, she said, for 2 more days. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she finished checking the 4 line, made her note in the chart, and walked to the door. With her hand on the handle, she stopped. She didn't turn around. "Ask me again in 2 days," she said. She heard him exhale, not dramatically, just the sound of a man who had been holding something and finally put it down. She walked out into the hallway and stood there for a moment with her back against the wall and her eyes on the ceiling. 2 days later, Reid Winslow walked out of Harlow Medical, not in a wheelchair the way he had arrived. He had pushed hard through every PT session, harder than anyone had asked him to, and while the road ahead was still long, he walked out on his own with a cane and his head up. Karen Voss was beside him with a phone in each hand. 2 new security detail members flanked them. Simone was at the nurse's station when he passed. He slowed. Karen kept walking ahead without being asked to, which told Simone that Karen knew more than she let on and was probably rooting for this in her own gray blazer kind of way. Reid stopped in front of the nurse's station. He looked at Simone across the counter. 2 days, he said. She looked back at him. Her hands were flat on the desk. Her heart was doing something loud and inconvenient. "You almost died in my hospital," she said. "I know." "Twice." "I know that too. And you want to take me to dinner." "I want to take you somewhere you've never been," he said. "And then I want to hear every answer you didn't give me in that room." He paused. "I meant what I said. Simone." Every word. The hallway was quiet. A phone rang somewhere. Neither of them moved. Then she reached under the counter, picked up a pen, and wrote her number on the back of a patient information card. She slid it across the counter. She said, "Don't make me regret that." He picked it up. That almost smile again, fuller this time. "Real." "You won't," he said. He walked to the elevator. She watched him go. When the doors closed, she let out a slow breath and looked down at the counter where the card had been. Her colleague Deja appeared from the supply room, looked at Simone's face, looked at the elevator, and said, "Girl." Simone picked up her chart. "Don't. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Document your last 2 patients, and let me finish this report." Deja grinned all the way back to the supply room, and Simone, for the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, let herself smile too. What would you rate this story? Drop 0 to 10 in the comments right now. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more emotional journeys every day. And if it truly touched your heart, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support helps us create more stories like this. Every contribution, big or small, means the world. Ready for the next story? It is even more dramatic than this one. Click now. Thank you for being part of this journey.